Welcome to our live session today. My name is Stacey Galligan, and I'm here with Mike Sullivan, and we are here to help talk about 3 proven ways that we've seen DSO be reduced by 40%. A little bit about myself. I have over 20 years of experience in accounting and finance, working in both publicly traded companies as well as privately held PE-backed companies, from financial reporting manager all the way up to CFO. Mike?
And Stacey, thank you. And I'm Mike Sullivan, Managing Director here at Embark, and I've held multiple positions, both with clients and as both an owner-operator. We're here to talk today about the 3 proven ways we can cut DSO by 40% within 90 days. So, some of the things that we'd like to handle today, the first is, why expanding your collections team, just doing sales incentives and possibly using technology without a really well-defined plan in place might not move the needle. 3 of the things that you can do that we've observed over 18 projects across a variety of industries to move the needle. And then a step-by-step guide to accelerate that DSO by approximately 40% in 90 days from CFOs at 2 very different organizations. Real quick, we talked about your experience, Stacey, my experience, and we talked about like I said, 18 projects that we've done. I think I've done probably 12 or 13, and I think you've helped me with some of them, and I think you've got about that many under your belt.
I do. I have probably even more just with dealing with work when I was in industry, plus the projects I've had here from either being interim CFO or a very defined projects that are related to the accounts receivable within a company. One of the things I think through this as well is really thinking through your cash management and how do you optimize that. So not only thinking through how can you get cash in the door quicker with your DSO, but overall, how do you maximize your cash and why that is important.
Yeah. Absolutely. And that's a perfect intro to the first part of our session today. So the first thing we'll talk about are really the goals of cash management. Really it comes down to 3 things, enhancing liquidity, improving profitability, and removing risk. So let's take those one at a time. So of course, enhancing liquidity. I think, Stacey, is it fair to say up until a couple of years ago, maybe 3-4 years ago, we were in a low interest rate environment. Nobody really thought twice about it. So DSO wasn't that big of an issue because, hey, if you had good quality receivables or even not so good quality receivables and a revolver that wasn't super strict, it really, I've even said the word backwater. It was just not something that it seems a whole lot of CFOs were worried about. And then in the last few years with interest rate increases, banks tightening, reducing risk, all of the sudden there seems to be a renewed focus on it. And once again, just like we had during the global financial crisis, there really seems to be that, shall we say, focus and discipline back on liquidity and good cash management.
Yeah, I would agree. I think over the last handful of years, the growth that we've seen has slowed in a lot of industries, and the ability to have high growth in your revenue kind of overshadow poor practices and poor cash management is coming around. And so now we have a lot of clients that I've dealt with where we've seen cash constraints pop in, and overall business is still very healthy, but because of the increase in interest rates and or delay and slowness of customers paying is really impacting their business and their ability to grow the way they would like to.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, like I said, when money was easy to get, it seemed like liquidity was endless and nobody really cared that much about receivables. I mean, of course, you have to bring money in, but there wasn't nearly the focus on it, I think, that we're seeing today.
Yeah, exactly.
And so that leads into number 2 is improving profitability is, and you and I have talked about this, EBITDA, but the I in EBITDA is not irrelevant, and it is a cash cost. And with borrowing costs continuing to go up and up, a lot of CFOs have called us and said, hey, our EBITDA looks great, but we lost money last year, and our interest expense is a little out of control. And then they realize that a big chunk of that is the the interest expense on those receivables.
I agree. And I think one of the things, talking to a lot of our consultants here at Embark or coming in and talking to our clients, depending on the roles we come in or the projects, the first thing I always try to go is where's your cash position? What is actually going on? Because yes, your EBITDA may look great, your profitability actually, from a cash standpoint could be really great. But if you're DSO and you're not collecting, and your actual cash flows are really constrained, your ability to do anything on a growth basis or investment in your company gets really tightened. And that's where I've seen numerous engagements over the last handful of years being here at Embark, where companies really just look profitable and have major problems because of their cash.
Yep. And both of us have restructuring experience, and I'm sure that the old joke applies today more than anything else. Businesses generally don't go out of business because they're not profitable. They go out of business because they run out of cash.
Exactly. Yes. Cash is king, always.
Always is, always was. Yep.
Exactly.
It's so true. And the third part, is reducing financial risk, and really just poor collections practices introduce risk into a business. It's really unnecessary. But again, with it's treated, like I said, as a little bit of a backwater, and people forget that it is just good discipline, and it's a risk that sort of lurks in the background and creeps in when you have a lot of these poor receivables on your balance sheet. So good risk management practices really dictate a proper system and a proper set of procedures for collecting those receivables. So I guess the next thing that we'll talk into is that we'll talk about and get into is why poorly planned execution of a DSO reduction fails. So why do these projects that a lot of times we get called in to assist, why do we get called in to assist? What happens? And so to give our audience a little background, it's not uncommon, and it's actually very frequent here in Embark, that a client will call us up and say, hey, can you help us out with a receivables cleanup DSO improvement project? And we'll say, sure. And the very first thing they'll say is, well, we tried it, and we're just not getting the results that we've expected, and what we're seeing is not really what we'd like to see. Mm-hmm. So, what are some of those things? Collections issues, sales process inefficiencies, ERP implementations that have gone wrong, and then other initiatives that take management's focus off of just good day-to-day order-to-cash practices and divert their attention elsewhere, which then causes that DSO erosion. So let's unpack those real quick. So collections issues, it's so simple. It's just you gotta keep your customers on a tight leash when it comes to collecting, because every time you make an exception or you just don't have good practices and you don't follow up, it sets the tone and it sets an understanding that, this is okay. We can pay a couple days late today, a couple days late tomorrow. We'll push it a little farther on the next invoice, and the next thing you know, a customer that traditionally is net 30 and has paid fairly well is paying at the 55th and 60th day because nobody's really following up on them. Maybe Stacey, you give an example of a client that you've seen that happen at.
For sure. I think one of the things, especially in, maybe professional services firms, or where it's very client focused, people focused versus, customer to customer online, type industries, is people don't like having the conversation. I know, people don't want to be that person calling saying, hey, can you pay this bill? And so they delay it. And I think one of the big things in companies is really making the habit of, just like anything, communicate. And part of it is communicating to your customers and reaching out and making it where it's very easy of saying, hey, we've noticed this invoice is late. Can you let us know payment? And having it be very common occurrence versus when it gets so delayed or so late outstanding, and your sales team or whoever's responsible for that kind of collections process in your organization isn't comfortable reaching out. And I think that culture of having that communication with your clients or your customers is really important. And I've seen that fail numerous times at different organizations of just not building that communication and then to your point, following up, either sending emails, automated, there's a lot of technology out there that can be utilized that just isn't taken advantage of.
Yeah, and we'll talk more about technology a little later on, but so true. Using technology to handle some of those, as I call them, and I think you've heard of this before, touches. Just reaching out and touching the customer, pinging them via a text or an email is just so important to set a good cadence of, hey, bill's coming up, make sure you're ready to pay, and it just lets the customer know that you're on their radar and that you're on notice.
For sure.
The second one is sales process inefficiencies. We joke sometimes that most of our clients really don't have a collections problem. They have a billing and sales problem. It manifests itself in a collections problem, but it's really on the front end. And having a sales team that is, shall we say, sloppy or just undisciplined when it comes to sending those bills out or manual rebills makes it very, very difficult to collect on those. And customers are not stupid. They know that if you've got bad billing processes, it makes it very easy to say, hey, I'm not going to pay this invoice. And when you don't follow up, they know that, boom, they just got an extra 15 to 30 days to pay that, because that's how long it's going to take you to follow up and get supporting documentation on a bill. It's quite incredible. So getting the sales team to know up front that a proper bill has to be created, good processes for rebills, credits, discounts, etc. It makes it so much easier to collect, and so fixing those front end processes is a key way to get your DSO down, because a lot of times that discount that they've extended to one customer, another one finds out about it, or the salesman says, hey, I'm having an off month, I'll give a discount to this customer and this customer for a one time, and the next thing you know, you've got 10 customers that all have varying discounts. It's not properly accounted for, the bill doesn't reflect it, and then this particular salesperson has 20, 30, 40 bills, 10 credits, and it's just an absolute collections mess to try and wade through, and it eats up an enormous amount of collectors' time. Again, Stacey, I don't know if you want to mention anything there, and I know you're chuckling because you're like, yeah, I've seen it.
I would say, I think it's also the phrase, right? Like a lot of, not only like to your point of technology, ERP, where if you don't have good processes and you're not collecting the data that goes into it, you're going to get junk at the end. And that's similar to a kind of a sales invoice billing process that causes the issues in collections. If you're not, obtaining the proper email or address that invoices are supposed to be sent to, do you have the right contact? Do you have PO information that's needed? There's so many little bits of pieces at the front end that are needed to get a good bill out, discounts, client contact information. Like I said, some clients have, has to have a PO number referenced on the invoice, or they won't pay it. All of that, if you don't get it collected in a good systematic way at the beginning, is going to cause delays, and it's going to just extend out your DSO. So it's some kind of basic things that we don't think about, but really can have a massive impact on your DSO. And every bit of delay, sure, we get an invoice out, but because it's missing information or it's sent to the wrong person, just delays getting that paid. Because I know a lot of companies where if the AP team does not get an invoice, it's the day they get it, not maybe the invoice date that they pay on it. They manage their payables just like most companies, right? They're like, hey, we're going to do 30 days once we get it because we need processing time. So the sooner you can get it into that accounts payable team from your customer to pay, the sooner you're going to get it paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's an absolutely perfect segue into the next the next bullet point, which is ERP implementation challenges. New ERP or a modified or migrated ERP. It's always a call that gives me a little bit of a pit in my stomach when, well, we had a migration or we had an implementation that didn't go well, and now we're up against the clock because we're having trouble billing and we're rapidly depleting our cash. And oh, by the way, we've got to get this fixed like tomorrow. That's always a very scary place to be in. And for those of you that have followed my LinkedIn, I made a post, a little spicy post, about a month and a half ago about Lamb Weston, the producer of potatoes up in Idaho, that had an ERP implementation go slightly sideways, and they downplayed it a bit, but it caused them to shut off, I believe, ordering and billing for a while, and it was a fairly large hit to their P&L. But the even more stunning thing was the stock price hit. It took a 20% hit in a single day when they disclosed that. And I mean, that's no CFO wants to be in that position.
No, you really don't. And I think the other piece with it is not only the ERP is not implemented properly and your processes aren't implemented process, but it's assuming that your ERP is going to fix a bad process. Anywhere in accounting, I don't know how many times that I'm sure you've had, even more than DSO, where a company has problems in a process and they believe that some type of technology is going to solve the problem.
Of course, just sprinkle a little technology
because
on it.
If you sprinkle the technology, it'll get there.
Exactly, yeah.
However, the best ones are when you take a step back and really look at the processes and how are things going to, and the information and the data flow into that system to then be able to maximize it. So that's the other piece where we've seen calls from of saying, hey, we have a massive problem with our DSO, our invoicing billing. We're on X, Y, and Z system. We're going to transition to this system, and this system's going to solve the problem.
Yep.
How many times have you heard that?
Oh, too many. Way too many. Oh.
So that's the other piece too, is to stop and think through before you want to just implement, is to think through how can we think through this process? What can we do to improve that? And then maybe look at technology to solve that piece of things as well.
Yeah.
So it's a kind of combination, like we always like to say here. It's people, process, and technology. It's not one of the three. You got to have all three.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the last part of that, some of the execution fails or the other initiatives. And I'm sure, Stacy, you can attest to this too. Removing collections, not necessarily full responsibility, but partial responsibility away from your sales team, oftentimes can get very dangerous. I've seen companies merge, integrate, and one sales team is not used to doing it, and that bad process then infects the other sales team. And the next thing you know, sales being divorced from collections. Hey, they're putting up great numbers. They're billing all kinds of things, but they're not collecting on it. That's a very scary place to be. Or like I had mentioned earlier, just that really brutal focus on EBITDA. It's like, oh, well, hey, as long as the EBITDA is good, that's fantastic. And, you look at, as long as we increase sales, let's just get sales up. We'll worry about sales this quarter, and we'll worry about the collections the next quarter. Those initiatives that, if you don't think through the downstream impacts, can go sideways, and then you have a very expensive cleanup mess on your hands.
For sure. I mean, I kind of segues into an example I have that is a high growth company, extremely acquisitive, lots of different companies internationally pulled in together. And revenue was the focus for years and years and years.
Yep.
And high growth. And then certain streams and certain businesses that they've acquired with very siloed, manual, outdated processes, their growth started to slow. And also received some PE-backed money finally. And when the focus of the revenue started to grow down, the PE firms has always also started looking at EBITDA, and they're saying, hey, you're tossing off 15, 20 million of annual EBITDA in a year, but your cash is where and what's going on, and your DSO is what? And all of a sudden they're coming to a year end and wanting to pay bonuses, and we can't pay bonuses because we don't have any cash. And no one ever focused on that. Everyone focused on the growth, the acquisitions, and then maybe just now starting to look at EBITDA, and there was zero cash management.
Yep.
And it really that growth and that focus of just one area, either being just EBITDA or just revenue, and not thinking about the overall picture and what's happening, can really cause problems. And unfortunately for that company, it did. They're reassessing all of their processes now. We've come in, helped put in some reforecasting, cash forecasting, helping with their invoicing and processing, as well as kind of consolidating that because of all the acquisitions. But they're going to be in an over a year rebuild because of some of the issues that they've had.
Oh yeah, and I'm sure you've been in this position too. For many of our PE sponsored companies, nothing makes a PE backed company sponsor more upset when they see positive EBITDA numbers and the company says, hey, we need a cash infusion. Our EBITDA is good, but we need a cash infusion. It's never a pleasant call that they have to make.
No, and it is, yeah, that's the one call you want to, put your head in the sand.
Yes.
Just hope somehow it goes away and it
Hold
won't.
the phone away from because yes, they will be screaming on the other end of the
They
phone.
will be screaming on the other end.
Yeah. Well, so the next part of our discussion is dispelling assumptions and addressing the mindset, in talking about common assumptions that we hear that are made. Just emphasizing with our stakeholders, because there's lots of them. I mean, it's not just the CFO. It's often the board gets involved, the sponsor gets involved, the VPs or even managers get involved. There's a lot of people that are all interested in making sure that the process runs well. So we'll touch on that real quick, and then we're going to talk about some integrated solutions, and then we'll actually get into some examples of how we've helped. So starting out, again, with common assumptions, and Stacey, you hit on this one earlier. One of the most dangerous ones, and we see it time and time again, is, hey, let's just throw technology at the problem. We just wrapped up a client not too long ago that we were called in after they had tried that, and the implementation of the specific technology tool that they used. It was supposed to be up and running in 90 days, and 9 months later, it still wasn't up and running. And they called us in and they said, help, please. They put up like the little help sign, like, help, please. And we're like, sure, what's going on? And yeah, they thought that this company, or that this technology solution, the company that sold the technology solution, gave them a great sales pitch. Hey, this will fix all your problems. Didn't address the underlying data issues, didn't address the underlying lack of ERP integration, and of course the implementation failed fairly spectacularly. We were fortunately able to come in and rescue it sort of at the last minute, but it was a very unpleasant place to be. So sort of the takeaway from that is technology is an option, but it should never ever be the sole option. When you're looking at a technology solution, make sure that you look at all of the things that technology solution will touch, between processes, people, data, infrastructure, for success.
For sure. Yep.
So, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm
You're
done. I'm done talking. No.
Right.
So the second one is, empathizing with stakeholders. Again, if a collections team has been running hard and fast for several months because they've been trying to get ahead of this, they're going to be burned out. And a lot of times that's what we find when we get on site is we'll talk with the CFO. The CFO will have a pretty good idea of what they want to do. But then we'll talk with the boots on the ground, and like I said, usually it's the collectors, but also sometimes salespeople. They'll be frustrated. They'll throw their hands up, and you'll do the first set of interviews, and they'll be like, "We're at a standstill. We've got way more volume than we can possibly take care of. We are deluged with emails because our process is completely broken. So customers are emailing us, salespeople are emailing us. The salespeople are frustrated because the collectors are not getting back to them, and I hate to use the analogy, but it's a really good one. It's like a pile up on the freeway. The first car crashes, and then it's just boom, 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 and next thing you know, you've got a 60-car crash, and everything behind it comes to a screeching halt, and then you've got to start picking the pieces up, and it's not pleasant. So starting with an understanding of where all of those stakeholders are lets you begin to unravel that bad situation that they've sort of found themselves in. I'm sure you probably have a war story or two from being on site and seeing that happen and being like, it's okay.
It's okay.
Okay.
I think one of the things that when you see the pile up occur, right, is you got to start figuring out how do you get the cars off of each other, this kind of thing, right? Like how do you actually start dissolving this thing? And I think that's the piece where I've seen companies handle it in two ways. The one way is very siloed, and it's a collections team issue, and they have to figure it out, and it's a siloed event.
Yep, the collections team will fix it.
They will fix it.
Yeah, they'll fix it.
They'll fix it versus a more collaborative approach of, hey, guys, like we need to reassess how this process is and we need help. And I think that's the big piece where I've seen really good successes when your ops, your sales, your accounting, finance, collections team, everyone gets in a room and figures out how are we going to solve this together versus pointing fingers at each other. Nothing ever gets done. No headway ever gets made. And the problem just continues when one team says, oh, either we'll fix it, but not include anyone else, and or everyone else says, you need to fix this. Deal with it on your own. It's your problem. And I've seen it, and it's just a disaster. So that team work is needed across an entire company when you get to that point and stage of an utter standstill. Otherwise, you're not going to get through it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. So, and of course, Stacy, you have kids. I'm sure you've seen Wreck-It Ralph, right?
I have, yes.
So how many companies have you gone to where you find a fix-it Felix? I can fix it. Oh no, you can't really. It takes more than one person to fix it. So, but it is sort of funny to watch think that one person sometimes can fix a multi-car pileup. This is a company-wide event that needs to have multiple stakeholders involved.
Agreed.
So, and so I guess the next thing that we'll touch on here is talking about again real solutions. So again, we talked about the solution of technology. We talked about getting good processes in place. Let's maybe share with the audience one or two good case studies or examples of situations that you've seen go well. So I'll let you start, and then I'll throw one of mine in the ring too.
Okay. Well, I've had numerous companies, but one in particular where they have some pretty significant seasonality in their business, and coming the last couple of years out of very high growth, their practices on customer credit assessments and credit limits were lacking. Their invoicing process was extremely outdated, including their systems.
Okay.
And a very short-staffed team, just not staffed because of their systems to deal with some of the growth. And with the seasonality of their business, very high holiday kind of spend, and have a mixture of B2C and C2C, or B2B and B2C type situation, it really caused a variance in how invoices were created because of that, and how billing occurred. Some were easy and some were not. Coming in, their team really had to reassess how they did the entire invoicing process as well as the collections process. And revamping, what does it look like? How do we assess credit? And I think the other piece was, how do we automate some of the payments coming in? They were a very heavy check payment, and is from both the accounts payable but receipt, which also delays understanding where you are from a cash reconciliation, that type of thing. So helping them communicate with their customers and getting their ACH or wire information out so that customers can make automated payments versus just checks, as well as the processing of assessing new customers coming on and how their process for credit was going to be issued. And then we just did a massive cleanup as well, just giving resources to get some of the processes aligned, as well as tools, and then helping them get a better defined process before they went and did a new ERP implementation, because they were very outdated systems that needed to get updated to help with some automation of the invoicing process that their current systems just weren't going to be capable of. Since then, it's about a year and a half now, they have still talked with the client. We still have helped in some different ways, but their cash forecasting, their cash collections has improved immensely. They've actually been able to redo their debt facility because of it, with better cash improvement. And so they've gotten a lot better loan terms than they previously had because of some of the issues they were having.
Yeah, so many good points there, and I'll take a couple real quick. The first one being seasonality. When you have a business that's very seasonal and you have people doing billing that don't traditionally do it, or you have seasonal discounts, that's a complex, very complex billing environment that can lead to problems 30, 60, 90 days later. Great point there. The second thing that you bring up too is a team that's understaffed. We see that a lot too. That there was a reduction. There was a thinking that technology could eliminate a position, or a position wasn't backfilled, and the backlog just started to build, and it's now at a very, it's not only unsustainable, but there's no way you can dig out of it without specialized help. And obviously, we're happy to provide that.
Yes, we are.
The example that I will give, we had a customer that was in the B2B space. They had done an ERP implementation. it had gone well, or so they thought it had gone well, but there were very small errors that had crept into their billing system, and nobody really knew how to resolve them. And their sales looked great, EBITDA looked fine. And then the next thing they know, 90 to 120 days after the implementation happened, they aren't able to collect, and their cash collections just went off of a cliff. And they brought us in and said, hey, we really need some help here, and this is what we think what's going on. And we diagnosed the situation, and like many of our other clients, they thought, oh, well, hey, we can fix it. We'll just go out and we'll just redouble our efforts to collect. And it turned out that they really hadn't thought through how that billing system would work with rebills and credits, and it put their collections team in an impossible position where they couldn't reconcile and they couldn't get the customers the corrected bills with modified terms or with the discounts. And so that was a very, very big lift, creating a new process for them to then triage how to classify each one of these cases where a customer was incorrectly billed, customer needs to be rebilled, credit was misapplied, a discount was misapplied. It was a great success story, and we dropped their DSO, their total time by 40% on that particular client, because there were a lot of cases where they had specialized billing terms that hadn't been contemplated when they put their ERP in.
I think that's from an accounting finance, I don't know how many times I've heard team members say, what did the sales team do? Why didn't they tell us about this?
Oh, the sales team promised us.
The sales team
Yes.
said they would never do these special terms or never. And
they told me I would get a 20% discount on unicorns, not a 30.
Yeah, they said they had used our standard contract, and then they didn't. They modified it, and they didn't tell anyone.
Exactly.
And I think that back to my communication point and why it's not just technology or it's not just one thing, but the people, process, technology, it's fine for the sales teams to do those things. Let's get the sales. You just have to communicate it, and you have to have an efficient and effective process to do it so that you can then get the invoices out properly.
Absolutely.
But like those siloed decision making, or we changed that, and not thinking that accounting or finance needs to know. That's the other thing. Oh, you guys needed to know we were doing this? Why would you need to know that we were doing this? And let's clean it up on the back end. Mm-hmm. I think I've heard more times than I'd like to hear. And
you can clean it up on the back end, but it costs some money to do it, and there's an opportunity cost, there's a capital cost, and just a team member, a cultural cost too, to cleaning it up on the back end. So if you can do it up front, all the better. So we're getting towards the end of the session here, but we want to open it up to a little bit of Q&A, and our team is keeping an eye out. So I think we had a question come in. We actually did have a question just pop up here. Do either of us have any experience with healthcare companies dealing with insurance payers who have extreme leverage not to pay and reimburse? Actually, we do. And I just worked on a client last year that was in that exact situation. They were extremely frustrated because they were renegotiating with their insurers. And their insurers were like, well, you're either going to agree to our terms, or we're just going to stop paying altogether, and you can go after us if you want to, but we're gonna hold your feet to the fire to make you negotiate on our terms. That is a very specialized area of collections. Healthcare having a completely different comp model, a collections model. It's very different, and I'm very pleased to say that we have a dedicated healthcare team based up in Nashville, but we have members all around the country that have extensive experience with our healthcare clients. Mm-hmm. We do have experience there, and if you have any questions about the healthcare industry and specifically collections, always happy to have a conversation. Feel free to reach out to us via email or LinkedIn. And would like to have a call or a coffee and discuss how we can help out. So anything you want to add to that?
No, I would agree.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, that was easy.
I know.
Yeah, there you go. If there's any other questions as we wrap up here, we can grab them. But I guess, one of the things that we pride ourselves about at Embark and, with our new brand is that, Happy Works. We have an incredible team. We have an incredible set of resources. We've been down these paths, and it's, I guess, a bit of a juxtaposition that a lot of times our clients are not happy. They're in a really rough position. But when you bring in talented resources that love what they do and are happy with what they do, we can achieve some really awesome things together. So happy really does work. So
Happy does work.
happy does work.
Happy
yeah.
does work. And
So
I think
even if it starts out sad, we get to happy.
we always get to happy, hopefully. I mean, most of the time. I'm not going to say 100% of the time, but most of the time.
That's very British of you.
I know.
We're not happy. We're sort of pleased, exceedingly pleased, but we're not happy.
Exceedingly.
We're never happy. No, not at all. No, we absolutely
No.
are, and we are always happy when we're able to help out our clients in these tough situations. It's the best feeling in the world when you have a client come up at the end of an engagement and say, I didn't think this could be done, or I thought it could be done, but it would be a lot more painful, but you really got us out of a bad situation. So again, when a client's happy, happy works.
Exactly. I would
So,
agree.
With that, we really appreciate everyone that was able to join us today. Again, any questions or a follow-up, we'd love to have a conversation. Feel free to reach out to us via email or LinkedIn. I have been Mike Sullivan. This has been Stacy Galligan, and we look forward to connecting with you all very soon.